I request everyone to please reassemble for the next session. The third session is on rise of processed and non-processed foods in the regional trade. I would now like to request Dr. P.K. Anand and the rest of the panelists to please come up on the stage. Before we begin, a brief introduction about our chair. Dr. P.K. Anand is a visiting fellow at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries. He has previously worked at the Niti Aayog, where he was the lead for SDGs, Development Monitoring and Evaluation, Plan Appraisal, and issues related to international cooperation, G20, and industry. As a member of the Indian Administrative Services, he served in the Ministries of Textiles, Defense and Rural Development for the Government of India. At RIS, Dr. Anand is handling the work streams related to localization of SDGs and indices, progress and implementation, monitoring and evaluation of SDGs, STI for SDGs, South-South cooperation, and triangular cooperation on SDGs, among other issues. I invite you, sir, to begin the session.
Thanks a lot, Amanat. A very good afternoon, and I appreciate those who are still awake after lunch. And I have been part of the proceedings since morning. Some points which have emerged, I'll cover a few points, then Mr. Devesh Roy has to catch a flight. I'll hand over to him as the first speaker. The first thing which comes to my mind is that when we talk of any food items, on the one side is Engel's law, which says that if my incomes go up, I'll assign a diminishing proportion to my food basket. At the same time, the realities of modern life state that when, besides incomes, their non-human consumption is there. By animals as well as we require a lot of biofuels now. There was a slide also on 265 is 200 liters vis-a-vis maize. Now, incomes are rising, people have more opportunities to borrow also. People have higher levels of wealth also, relatively, if I neutralize for inflation. People have changing preferences. There are diversities in food. There are so many items. So that kicks up the demand. On the other hand, if I have a look at the secular trend, over last 20-25 years, we had calculated, Rohit and Rao are sitting here from my team. The good news is that the food production globally, I'm not talking of processed, overall food production is rising by about 50 million tons a year. But that is not sufficient, because it's not that the secular trend can be maintained. There is a challenge of climate change. I'm not talking of, say, conflicts for the time being. Secondly, there is a lot of price volatility. If I go back to history, just one item, potatoes, and you know the Giffen paradox. The Giffen goods are there. When price rises, there was a price rise of potatoes, and consumption increased because people could spare. Effectively, their income was reduced and they could spare less on meat. If suppose in my kitty there are only two items, one vegetable and one cereal. So that being there, a processing ensures that shelf life is increased. All the more when we talk in terms of exports, exchange across the countries, within the country also, that adds a lot. And there was one presentation which stated that the rise of profitability in processed items is much higher. It has to be higher in any case. It has to be higher because you have a better shelf life, and it gives a sort of price stability. In the context of India, three items which we call TOP, top: tomatoes, onions, and potatoes. Again, they become so much price unstable at times. There was one allegation against India that we have banned certain exports. There is no ban, let me tell you. There was never a ban. If you see all the notifications of last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, there has never been a ban. There was a regulation, and there were reasons that domestic public has to be served food first. So regulation is that exports would be channelized only through a certain channels, like say, state channels only. Of course, there was a fall in the level of exports. Of course, there was an adverse impact on countries, including countries of this region. I do admit all that. But ban per se was never there. I would like to add one last point before I hand over to Devesh. This is one sector, processed plus non-processed, which showed its resilience during the COVID period. Hardly any deaths, and nil. There was a statement just now, nil due to starvation. I recall 1987 drought when I got a call from my chief secretary. I was divisional commissioner Ajmer, and it was a real. If I forget about the preceding century, 1896. Or sorry, 1899. The 1987 drought in Rajasthan was too much of a drought. And what I did, I kept 2 bags of wheat at each Patwar headquarters, and I issued an order under my own signatures that you use it. If you fail to use it, if there is any death, you will be accountable. If you use it, there will be no questions how you used it. And so once a letter went from my level, below collector and others, right up to the Patwari, it was ensured, and this model was adopted in the state, that there were no starvation deaths. So food becomes so important. Anyhow, I come back to the session and I hand it over to Devesh. We have already introduced him, so I would not repeat that again. Devesh, please.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you for just giving this opportunity and also for accommodating, because I have a flight to catch, which has the benefit that I present and I don't answer the questions, which you can hand over to Abul. And he will be the person in charge for answering the question. So, when Dr. Anand talked about these things about, the process trade, and I know there's a lot of governance issue in this whenever you to think about, and that's what we really would talk about. So the way to think about process, unprocessed trade, it is only best understood if you think about from the chocolate story, right? Chocolate globally is a $150 billion industry, right? It requires cocoa, and whether if you're in Southeast Asia, we'll call it cacao or whatever, right? But where is 80% of the cocoa produced? It's in Africa. Out of that $150 billion industry, what is the share that Africa gets? I mean, you can have a guesswork on this, but it's less than 10 billion, okay? And so that is the story, and that's how, India is not a colonial power, Bangladesh is not a colonial power. We're not talking about from the colonization of exports here, what we are talking about in BIMSTEC. But it is actually about the share in the value, right, of the whole value that is created whenever there is some from production to consumption. So at what level? And that also becomes your precursor to now when we are, those who are students of economics, we have always had like separate segments that really dealt with trade. And there were all these, we are specialists in value chains, right? And they work in trade. And so now trade and value chains are basically the mirror image of each other, right? Trade takes place through value chain, through globalized value chains, through regional value chains. And this is all about who gets what share of the value, right? So this is why we care about whether you are at an unprocessed stage, you are at a semi-processed stage, or you are at a processed stage. So I was talking with, Dr. Jivika is here, I was looking at there. But so we have been working on, so one of the questions that, we look at this case of India, we look at the case of Sri Lanka, and so you have good coffee, you have good coffee export, but in which part of the chain that you are still operating? If you're operating at the unprocessed segment, and so if you look at from those value chain integrations, they will always think about, if you look at global value chains, you'll have a globalized value chains which will say forward GVC and a backward GVC, right? And this is because telling of that whether at which component of the value chain that you are seeing. Now, if you have always heard this story that you make an iPhone, it goes through 26 countries. If you may, iPhone is too sophisticated. A bicycle goes to 12 countries before it becomes a bicycle, right? And that is how the value chains, and that is why I'm saying that trade and value chains are synonymous now. They are not separate. And you have no reasons to argue that, this is going to be any different in agri-food trade. So that is our motivation, that we want to look at this component by looking at trade by levels of processing, because it's all about what share of the value is captured by who, right? So it's, if you look at this distinction between processed, unprocessed, there's a bit of a normative lens to it, in the sense that you think about processed, ultra-processed food, with sugar, with sodium, and so with fat content, and that is, so we are not taking any normative lens here, right? We just have, in economics, we have a positive, and then, economics is always positive and normative. So we are not on the normative side of it. We are only on the positive side of it, which is to say what it is, right, in terms of the trade. So, and that's where you look at colonization of export, that's the exact economic lens. The British were not concerned about, they wanted to make textile, the cotton, and so they take cotton or indigo, whatever they needed from India. So this is, so it is all about that economic lens that we're going to look at. So none of these countries, even if they are in as colonial powers, they still have about a share in value argument. That, we always have really big targets. Even say Exim Bank has target, we want to double or even to reach this level of agri-export. Now, agri-exports, that will come through what component of the value chain you get into and what level of value chain integration that you have. Because that is, now we are saying that trade and value chains are synonymous, right? So, and that really tells you that, I have, as a trade economist, I always have a dream, right? And that dream is that when will there be an award for the best importer in the country, right? We will always have an award for the biggest exporter and things like that, right? Because the reality of trade is that you cannot be a successful exporter unless you are a successful importer, right? And that's why you need to understand the synchronicity between trade and value chains, right? So I'm saying that, in trade literature, we call it orthodox opening versus heterodox opening. Orthodox opening is that, it's a misnomer in sense. The orthodox is that we are open on both sides, export as well as import. But our orthodox, that shouldn't nice, but if you're orthodox, it doesn't give you a good sense, right? But heterodox opening is that you're open on the export side, but you're closed on the import side. And whatever we're discussing here, and in order to get into a value chain integration and getting into global value chains, you need orthodox opening, right? Then only you will get into, what component of the value chain. So you always talk about, now we don't look at gross exports. We look at trade in value added. So you really have comparative advantage, your specialization defined at a component of the value chain. That is how the global trade is taking place. China, what component of an iPhone did China produce? Very little. but it's part of that value chain. So you'll see that there's something made in China. And same way, so we think about, and this is why we want to look at processed, semi-processed, unprocessed products to understand which component of that value chain that you have specialized in, that's where your comparative advantage lies, okay? So we think that looking at this analysis of as a unprocessed, semi-processed, processed product is basically a precursor to value chain integration and even a precursor to global value chains, right? And why do we bring this? That, we have been, in our morning session, there was all thing that we should not be looking at agriculture, we should be looking at agri-food system. So what we are talking about is basically going to be one of the biggest component for what we'll call as the agri-food system transformation, right? And we'll come to that in that. So one of the most interesting things that we did in this paper, we have a limited focus where we selected the commodity which we rationalize on whose components of processed and semi-processed, unprocessed that we are looking at. So here are these coffee, maize, and edible oil, and there are reasons that one is data reasons, but also we are going to have principal reasons for why do we select this commodity. I'm most interested in edible oil, right? Edible oil is that solitary commodity which actually can tell you about a GVC because of policy, not because of your comparative advantage. India puts in very high tariffs on edible oils. The moment it happens, Nepal starts exporting edible oil to India. Sri Lanka starts exporting edible oil to India. Bangladesh starts exporting edible oil to India because you have arrangements under SAFTA where they can come in duty-free. So if you are an exporter from Malaysia or Indonesia, you will sell it first to Nepal or to Bangladesh, do a little bit of processing on that to meet the rules of origin, and then it gets exported into India, right? So I always think of edible oil in our part of the world is the biggest case of policy-induced GVC, right? Because of the tariff hopping that takes place. Now, coffee and maize that we are going to, and I said that this is a very big part of agri-food system transformation, because if there is one commodity that you're going to think about as part of this food system transformation, is that there was a Dr. Anand talked about that they're going to be more towards animal source foods, and so once you have animal source foods, one of the biggest changes that is going to happen is how the cereals are going to be used between food and feed, and maize is the most important feed, and that's a very big part of the agri-food system transformation. Coffee we do this because coffee I think has a huge potential. And we always take the case of Vietnam coming from nowhere, how it moved up the value chain and then got integrated into the GVC. And that is something where, in a lot of countries in the BIMSTEC, which have a great potential in coffee, but we think that they have been underperforming in terms of where they are located in terms of their value chain positioning. Okay? So this thing we have talked about, and there is also, we are working a lot on kind of the groundwater situation in Punjab, and maize was a story we thought it would be for diversification, but now with a lot of spring and summer maize, so it has also become a water guzzler in itself, right? Because that time it's not there. But in many parts of the world, actually, maize is an important component of the diversification story, right? And it is one crop in which, the BIMSTEC, like many other places, there's a lot of gap to meet in terms of the technology frontier. I mean, that definitely is driven to the extent by GM, which is about, if you get 9 tons per hectare, and then but they're still within the non-GM segment also. There's a lot of things to approve in. So that's what we are going to talk about and see. This is so we are going to look at just what the data allows that we look at unprocessed, semi-processed, and processed products in these commodities, right? In terms of BIMSTEC. So one of the issues that we always want to, I know there's a lot of emphasis on looking at intra-BIMSTEC trade, but in trade, I think it becomes a very difficult concept to understand that, you're looking at something intra within the group. Trade is very general equilibrium. So I think if, if India exports good seed to Bangladesh, that helps Bangladesh to export final product, then it will not be a lot of final product intra-BIMSTEC trade, but the BIMSTEC trade would have really contributed to that. That's why he said you have to look at imports and exports and consumption as a precursor to a value chain integration. So these are, I'm not going to be everybody because I think that's been talked about in the morning presentation. So what we find from there, if you just, just took a snapshot of what we have got. So we are talking about, moving up the value chain, and the only interest we have from that perspective is that are these BIMSTEC countries positioning themselves at that part of the value chain where they are getting a greater share of the value, right? And that's where the story gets a little murky in the sense that, if you look at process exports, and these are the three tiers, right? We have unprocessed, semi-processed, and processed. So they are kind of a pecking order, right? A vertical scale. So if you look at the process exports of coffee, maize, and edible oil is, as I said, this is totally it's very complex in that sense. It's not a comparative advantage-based trade. It's a very policy-induced value chain integration in terms of, so we talked about that India, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and all these cases that are there. But if you look at coffee and maize, and the two countries like Sri Lanka or India, when you move up that chain towards processed segment, what you find is that the exports from these countries have been comparatively stagnant, right? And so this is, if you look at around level of processing, and so in some way, and whenever you're doing this unprocessed coffee exports, so it is a bit like colonization of exports redux, right? Because you are still now sending this to now look at which are the countries which are the recipient of your exports. These are the countries, these are the high income countries. They might not be colonizers per se, but they are these high income countries where they are getting the share of, they are capturing the value, which is happening so we did a paper, it's about this colonization of exports, and we call it, it's a very famous song, the Three Great Stimulants. I did not know, our reviewer of our paper told us that when we wrote that paper, they say, you should name it the Three Great Stimulants, because we did tea, coffee, and chocolate. And so the story was basically this, that, so it is a bit of in coffee exports from the BIMSTEC region, this is kind of a colonization redux, that we are still operating much less on the upper segment about the process. Same way in maize. Maize, since I come from Bihar, so maize is very important. This is one of those few commodities or anything in the world in which Bihar leads, right? So, there are a lot of other things which are not very positive, but anyway. So the point is, but maize, I think, when there was kind of the food price crisis of 2008, Bihar did very well. In fact, of exporting maize even to Southeast Asian countries. But that was a very stopgap thing, and they were still going as very unprocessed maize, right? And this is what we really want to do this, and you can look at this, all these components. This is, so Abul, can I click this somewhere? So anyway, see if I can just... So because it needs an internet connection, right? So that's why. It has. No internet. That's okay, just leave it. So this is just a link for the blog that we wrote for all the things that I'm talking about in terms of the edible oil story. But this is what is published on the... Now, the last bit that we are going to talk about when we look at this trade. So we have said that, you're basically not at the subpar component of the, the value chain for the BIMSTEC countries. So, and this is all the data, but so what we really want to explore, so, and this is about all our trade work. Is that we say that, what is the trade performance? You really use the theoretically consistent method to understand that, whether you are trading up to your potential or you're not. But we want to go beyond when we do this work. We want to say what are the factors that could be explaining so-called undertrading. So how do you say undertrading in trade economics? Whether you are trading up to your potential. If you're below your potential, you're undertrading. If you're above your potential, you're overtrading. If you are up to just your potential, you are normal trading. But potential is not known. You have to estimate it. So you need a model. So the model based on fundamentals, that what determines trade, then you predict the trade, actual trade, relation to predicted trade, that gives you a sense of undertrading. And that's what we did for these commodities. And so these are, those who will be like purists, they want to know all the methods. These are really intricate computing requirement. We have to run these programs for days and days in order to do this, because these are millions of data points and so on. And so all that we do, and so what we really find, last bit, let me just conclude is, so once we get under trading, and we really find that when it comes to process trade, we have a comparatively high incidence of under trading. As you move down the value chain, you'll not have so much of under trading, that is trading below potential. So, and going back to where, you have to be when you are a good exporter, you need to be a good importer. And that's the intricacy or the intricate link between trade and value chains, right? Because trade takes place through value chains, right? So the idea is that, one of the big factors that we have there is, so what are the factors related to undertrading? And I'll stop. And one is tariff escalation. This is when the countries that are, which is what the colonizers did, right? They would make it, you send us cotton free, right? But if you want to sell us cotton shirts, we'll put like 70% tariff. So it's not only for the BIMSTEC countries, when you look at BIMSTEC countries, they do face tariff escalation as you move up the value chain. So their processed exports are subject to much higher tariffs or other barriers than that. So if they have to negotiate, that that is where the negotiating power comes, right? That you have to move. That is one of the second bit that we say that this BIMSTEC regions. The second factor that we have identified through our empirical analysis is the logistic costs. Our logistic costs that could explain undertrading is even higher, much higher than what we have in ASEAN countries. And even though 2 of the ASEAN member nations are part of BIMSTEC, but if you take the overall ASEAN average, and these are the figures that you will see. But most importantly that we want to say is the issue of domestic factors. Now, in the morning we were arguing that, should not be looking at trade always as international trade and only at border policies, tariff, non-tariffs, and so on, in order to explain what you see as trade flows. Trade is pretty general equilibrium. It has to look at, so most important costs in explaining the trade patterns could be domestic factors. We talked about that in the informal trade segment, as well as, we are doing a lot of work using geospatial data where we're trying to look at the cost that it is for taking the production locations from there, taking it to the port in India. India has many ports. How much time it takes? How much cost does it take? So, and then try to understand the port efficiency. And these are domestic factors, your infrastructure, your policies, your state border restrictions. So all these factors, these are the things that are really important. So what you'll see from our work, what we say that there are two factors that you can summarize all this are time to trade and cost to trade. And so, so anything of all these barriers that you're going to say will just boil down to this. So that's where I'll, conclude that this is what we have is that, we really need to move up the value chain. That's the guiding objective or whatever you'd have for the BIMSTEC countries, if you look at in agri-food trade. There were sessions in the morning time where about trade facilitation. Dr. Day was presenting about that, I guess. So there's a lot of things that you need to focus on, time to trade and cost to trade, which will all relate to your trade facilitation, among other things, inter alia, right? So, that's where I'll conclude, and this is what we have done. This is all related to, you'll find access to all the work that IFPRI has done in relation to BIMSTEC countries. That is on our website, on our project portal, and that's we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devesh. It was very comprehensive, and to be very frank, you illustrated through 3 examples. It can extend to other commodities also. That means this kind of position is taking place for other commodities also. You're very well given with numbers, the way, say on cocoa, the value addition which takes place in the producer countries is quite minimal, whereas there's much of it in the developed world. It's so true of so many other commodities also. Depends, in some commodities like cocoa, say domestic consumption may be say less than 20%. In commodities like say rice for a country, domestic consumption may be say 95%. And that's also one reason why when we talk in terms of say global price instability, since the tradable surplus is very limited, it's a small proportion, if it is a much smaller proportion of the production of a country, and there is any adversity like climate or a bad weather, rains, drought, it automatically diminishes the surplus. Globally, if at the same time the phenomena is happening in other countries also, say El Nino, the overall surplus which can be traded becomes a much lower proportion of the one which was traded in the last years. So I think you have touched upon with the very good illustrations, examples, and a very rich PPT. I compliment you. I know you have a flight to catch, and I was talking to Suresh Babu that I was reading many of your papers yesterday, and I told him that I appreciate the selection process in IFPRI. And in most of the think tanks, when I see people who are working tirelessly, it is a selection process which puts think tanks a bit a cut above so far as the quality of people, quality of researchers who are working, and especially in those think tanks where one is not told what the result should be. So once again, my compliments, and I move on to Mr. Mirza Islam, and he has worked in the agriculture sector itself. He was DG of Bangladesh Institute of Nuclear Agriculture. His areas of specialization are plant breeding and research, especially genetics and plant breeding. He has worked a lot. He has written a lot of papers and on management in this sector. So floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Chair, dignitaries, delegates, and participants from these Southeast Asian regions. I'm very grateful to having this opportunity to talk in front of you, and I'm grateful to RIS and also other officials. So if you see about actually Bangladesh agriculture, it is actually the plays a pivotal role in South Asian country and also in economy, employing a significant portion of the population and contributing to this country's food and nutritional security. And our agriculture actually, based on the actually the rural employment force, about 43% of the employment actually based on agriculture, and mostly dominated by the food sector, and particularly the trade policy, the processed and non-processed food is the key sector. And that's why actually I just set some of the points to see how actually what are the factors affecting the processed and non-processed food trade in the region. So our vision actually, our Minister of Agriculture vision is sustainable, safe and profitable agriculture, and mission is set the increasing the production and productivity. In the morning session, somebody asked how we can increase the productivity. The productivity actually is the main, is actually we have to see the actually the farmer's income. That is very important. How much income actually is getting the farmers? That is ensured. That should be ensured by our agricultural scientists and the policy levels. That is very important. Because you see that nowadays actually farmers are, very much reluctant to go to the field, even their children's too, because of, they are more on, non-farm activities and other business, and also some of the, the government service and non-government service they are looking. That's why we have to ensure the productivity. That is also in SDG 2, it is clearly mentioned that we have to increase the productivity. So you can grow the 3-4 crops in a year. Sometimes in our Bangladesh, we are actually looking for 3, 4 or 5 crops in a simple pitch of land. That is very challenging. And also we have to ensure the crop diversification. So only not the rice, although rice is the staple food, but we are looking for the other nutritional crops like pulses, oil seeds, and also vegetables. And of course, we have to have the nutrient-dense crop varieties and biofortifications, and also safe production and marketing it, of course. And also, we are looking for the modernization of the marketing for making the agriculture profitable. And we are actually focused on the ensuring the food and nutrition of the people. I'm not the economist, actually I'm just a simple plain reader. That's why maybe I don't know much on the economics, but from the basics you see the macroeconomic indicators. Our GDP is US dollar $460 billion in 2020. And agriculture share is about 11% to GDP, and poverty rate, actually it is the extreme poverty rate is 5%, but our poverty level is now 18.7%. And our per capita income is now US dollar 2,657. But before 8-7 years before, it was less than $1,500, like that. So 38% people are directly involved in agriculture, and because now the labor force also declining because of the mechanization, because labor price also now is very high in Bangladesh. Like you say about 1,500 taka in terms of rupees, maybe 1,200-1,300 rupees per day. Even you should provide them also 3 meals including. So it's very expensive now. Now we are looking for the mechanization. So our share of the agriculture is 5.7%. That is US dollar 71 billion budget for 2023-24 fiscal year. And we are will be graduating in LDC countries in 2026. And our vision actually in 2041 will be in the developed countries. And that's why actually we have to access to the market in 2029. And also now we have only 3 more years flexibility. So everywhere is, transformation now. We have transformation in agriculture like commercialization, and high value crops, income, also import substitution. And we are now, our government was focused on agro-processing and value chain, particularly engaged in the youth and women entrepreneurship and market development and also global supply chain. If you see the contribution of agriculture subsector in the GDP, the agriculture overall, it's actually decreasing. But if you see the demand of agricultural produces like for the non-human consumption like poultry, livestock, but agriculture still, it plays significant role. Like crops and horticulture, it is also decreasing rate, and livestock, it is also decreasing. Fisheries is a bit, stable and sometimes increasing, and forestry is also decreasing rate. And overall, agriculture growth is actually is stable and somewhat, decreasing. And I already mentioned the level employment is, is decreasing. And I'll not go through all the things. Our cultivable land is actually 8.8 million hectares. Our total cropland is, 16 million hectares, meaning that we have fragile ecosystem, unfavorable ecosystem. We have salinity about 2 million hectares, but severe salinity 1 million hectare. Drought 2.5 million hectare. We have submergence prone areas, flood prone areas about 4 million hectares. We have hilly areas, we have howard areas, deep howard areas where you can find the water, 12 months. So you cannot grow all the crops. So we have a lot of challenges in agriculture. But we have to increase the cropping intensity. It is now 198%, but our target is, is 300% at least. So if you see the area-wise major crops, rice is mostly actually occupies more than 70%, and all other crops, very, very less. And particularly wheat is decreasing because due to climate change, and also compete with the rice and, other crops. And production trend of the major crops, you see rice is actually increasing rate, about 25% increase, wheat is decreasing, maize is increasing, but most of the maize actually we are exporting. Potatoes we are exporting, pulses we are exporting, oilseed also we are exporting, particularly the soybean and palm oil. It's not soybean actually, it's mixed with the palm oil, and it's from the Malaysia, Brazil and other countries there. That's why actually we are worried about the oilseeds, because nowadays actually we are convincing our people to consume the mustard oil. That is not a problem. But the US, FDA and other people, they said, and European Union, they ban on the, the mustard oil. But in Indian study, the study that it's not actually like soybean oil, because it's not any problem with the human, because their digestive system and the metabolic system is different. So they studied on the pigs and also rabbits and also monkeys. So that study is not related to the human. So mustard oil actually is very safe for human consumption. So if you see the demand and supply, so for rice is okay, but rice is actually we are surplus, but wheat, maize, potato, pulses, oilseeds, we are actually still far behind the demand. But still, then we are our ranking is very good in the global position. Like Jute production, first in the export and second in jute. We are second position in jute products, and also jackfruit. Vegetables, we are third. Rice, after China and India, we are in third position. Onion, we are third position, but we are still, problem in the processing of onions, but because our shelf life and also some temperature problems, we cannot grow summer onion. So that's why we are also importing onions from India and other countries. And we are seventh in potato, mango in the seventh position, but we have very good varieties of mangoes. And guava, we are eighth position. And hilsa production, we are in the top production. The Bangladeshi hilsa is very, very delicious. You see, it's near the and Bengal, like Padma Ilish and even in some estuarine of the Padma is very good for hilsa. And we have open water capture fish, cultured fish, we are third. Tilapia production, we are fourth. Aquaculture is fifth position. And mutton, we have fourth. We have, Bengal goat. That is very famous, and it is our GI, this Bengal goat. And Bangladesh agriculture export items, particularly primary commodities we have frozen and live fish, and then shrimps, crabs, and also we have tea, vegetable, tobacco, cut flour, foliage, fruits, spices, dry food, and others. And jute goods is very famous. Nowadays, we are preparing by our own, by the rural, some of the industry and entrepreneurs we have. So we are producing jute bags and jute household items. This is very attractive, and we are now exporting to the Europe, even the Middle East. We have raw jute, jute yarn and twine, jute sacks and bags, and also others. Agriculture share is total export earnings. If you see the agriculture products, it's very much low, 1.52%. Frozen and live fish 0.6%. And total it is 2.28%. Jute goods 1.64%. And total export earnings is 3.92%. So our processing industry is very important. Now actually we are looking for the value addition. That is very important. Like in Vietnam, they actually import the coffee. They have also coffee, but they are importing coffee from Brazil and African countries. Say 1 kilo of coffee, they purchase it 700 taka, almost like $1. But when they added the value, it's not just 10 times higher they can sell. So that is the thing, value chain. So that is very important. Nowadays actually we are also now producing the coffee, cashew nut, the high value crops in Bangladesh. That's why actually we are looking for some industries. Like we have we are now exporting in 144 countries in all like small, although it's small portion, but we are exporting. And we have processed food industry where 2.2% of total workforce work, and processed food export growing rate 16.6%. And food processor 1,000, 90% maximum are small enterprises. And processed food market size is US dollar, it's 4.8 billion US dollar. So we have many actually, private industries like Square, Pran. Pran, they have very good network in about more than 150 countries. They are, exporting their food products. ACI, IFA, Dispahani, Krishvit Group, Ahmed Group, Nestle, Fuang, and Aki's Group. And 5 markets we have, like for the different agricultural producers, like agriculture and agro-processed products, frozen and live fish and jute products, like mostly in the UK, USA, Qatar, Middle East, and also some European countries, and also in Egypt. And we have our export earnings, like from India, we are getting 20%, and others almost 23%, and other very small 5%, 3%, and China is 3%, like Saudi Arabia, very small percent, like UK 4%, EU almost 19%. Yeah. Major importing countries here, Bangladesh export like USA, Germany, you see UK, Spain, France, India, Italy, Netherlands, Japan, Canada, and other European countries, China, Russia. And we have very good relation with Russia nowadays. Agri export share by destination, if you see India is 22%, EU 19%, UK 8%, Malaysia 6%, UAE 5%, USA 6%, Nepal 3%, China 3%, Qatar 2%, and others 20%. And export from Bangladesh in millions dollar, like frozen and live fish, about is 400 to 500 million US dollar. And agri products like also 500 to more than 800 million US dollar. Primary commodities more than $1,000. And jute goods also 900 million US dollar. And total earnings, more than 2,000 US dollar, which is around 6%. And national total export value and agriculture and percent sharing in 3 years, 2016, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19, you see total export is 34.82 billion US dollar. And it is about the 36.67 US dollar and 40.54 in the last year, I mean 18, 19. And agriculture products in 3 years, you see 533, 673, and 900 million US dollar. And percent of sharing, you see, is very low, like 1.53, 1.83, and 2.24. It's increasing. And major products export earning value in 18-19, like in US billion dollar, like 17, or even we have $17 billion, knitwear $16.8 billion. It's a big industry now because our women employment is engaging there. About 80% of the women engaged in the garment industry. That's a big industry now. And leather products about 1 billion, jute products 0.82 billion, and agricultural products including fish $1.42 billion, and others are $3 billion. And earning region-wise, our earnings, like in 56%, it is in EU countries, and others are 22% American region, and others are very low. So, yeah, okay. So if you see the last year's export in terms of volume, about in 16-17 it is about 347 million metric tons, but in value in terms of million US dollar, about 498 million US dollars here. So these are the products actually we are now exporting, like juice, drinks, snack items, particularly by the different private organizations. The confectionery industry, like frozen foods, dairy product, biscuits, spices, and lychee, mango, jackfruit. And jackfruit actually, like one crop, one priority products by FAO. FAO actually identified this product, jackfruit. It's our national fruit. And also second fruit is mango. So in mango, actually, we have a huge actually opportunity for export. Like we have every year 2.5 million tons of mango produced, and we are now actually exporting in different countries, like huge demand, like USA. But problem is the shelf life. Now we are planning to procure the gamma irradiator and also some electron beam, like a nuclear techniques, so that shelf life can be increased by 6 months, 7 months for the mangoes, onions, potato, tomato, vegetables, and other frozen foods, and even the processed foods. And also other fruits we are exporting. vegetables we are exporting, particularly in the Middle East, and also some in the ethnic markets in the USA, Canada, and Europe. Yeah. So also the aromatic rice, we have some local varieties and also high-yielding varieties we are now exporting. There is huge demand. And we have some examples because we are now export to the Australia. We have very good relation with Australia. Like ready-made garments, woven, textile manufacturers, like leather goods, footwear, agriculture, processed food. And also we are importing from the Australia, like high-value fruits, vegetables, sweets, lentil, pulses, milk products, etc. So not this one. And there is some actually limitation because we have actually our farmers are not actually familiar with the demand and supply. They are not acquainted with the market infrastructure, and they have limited access to the markets. Challenges for farmers diversifying their products. So market demand for non-staple crops may also be uncertain and sometimes inconsistent, discouraging the farmers from venturing into new agriculture enterprises. So they are very much flexible. So this year they got higher price in some oilseed production, but next year where the price goes down, then they just move to other crops. So farmers are not familiar about the international market policies of our farmers, and people have not enough knowledge about the quarantine issues and related compliances. And we have actually now apex body like BCCI, Bangladesh Bureau of Chamber of Commerce Industries. They are engaged with the exporting. And we have Bangladesh Fruits and Vegetables Allied Products Exporters Association, and we have Bangladesh Agro Processors Associations, and we have Bangladesh Frozen Food Exporters Association. So we have now a lot of policies we have now recently we developed we have every policies we have. We have good agricultural policies because the European countries and other, they have some compliance even in this region. So we have now these policies. And now we have actually domestic agri markets through mega investment. We have investment forum policy by FAO. So we have 5.8 billion US dollar. So we'll get for food market by 2030. We have crop protection 550 million US dollars. Seed market, we have 700 million US dollar. Agri machinery is 300 million US dollars. So these are the windows. So there we can have some new infrastructures. And we have major priority investment. So I will stop now. Yeah. So we have investment for policy like process industries. We have modernization of the marketing system, the irrigation and other efficient irrigation technologies, and smart agriculture. And these are the agro-processing industries we are looking for. So now we are looking for some investment so that we can increase our export in this region and other countries. And we have new recent projects. We call it partner, like World Bank funded projects, Program on Agriculture and Rural Transformation for Nutrition, Entrepreneurship, and Resilience in Bangladesh. It's a big project, 691 million US dollars. And we are engaged our National Agriculture Research Systems and our Department of Agriculture Extension and seed producing organization, they are engaged with this project. This is 5 years project. So we are now, we have impact on LDC graduations, and we have business and investment opportunities, and Bangladesh government is actually encouraging the investment. With the Indian government, they have recently meeting with our Honorable Prime Minister, with the Indians Honorable Prime Minister. So we have now, different negotiations and understanding that. So that's we are looking for high investment in exporting. Thanks for patience hearing.
Thanks a lot, especially for the beautiful graphics, and the points which you made included the issue of livelihoods. And we know that in the case of processing, we do add, in the immediate term, we do add, say, number of persons who can work in the sector, in the agriculture sector. Plus, it enhances the bandwidth over the year. If one can process different crops which are coming over the year. And I think the best kind of processing can be where the processed food has, say, sort of 1 year of good shelf life, so that by the time the next crop comes, the commodity is available. I also appreciate the point which you touched was on nutrition, which becomes so important that during the COVID period in India, when food grains were being given, 1 kilogram of pulses were also being given. So there is a lot of scope of enhanced trade among the BIMSTEC countries, and India is a big importer of pulses, and I think there's a time that someone does a research or a good research paper that when we get, say, 1 million ton more of pulses, say, from Myanmar, and how much undernutrition it cuts down and how much over the years on health expenditure is avoided. So it may be a rational policy that in the short run, even if we have to import, let us import. So that kind of a position. Anyhow, I come next to Professor Jivika, and she is from an academic institution. Her field is agriculture economics, and she is also on the faculty of University of Melbourne, Australia. Floor is yours, Jivika.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson, sir. And first of all, I would like to thank RIS and other organizers for inviting me for this presentation. And I'm aware that this session is devoted to processed food and non-processed food, but I took the liberty of talking about processed food trade in BIMSTEC countries. And of course, you all know that there is no universal definition for processed food. But I went by my own definition. So that is the food manufacturing sector production, which actually is listed under industry in national account classification. So we talk about raw products, so primary products in agriculture, but once they are processed, of course, they become manufacturing sector, and manufacturing sectors are listed under industry in national accounts. So that is the type of products that I'm going to focus on. And I will briefly talk about opportunities and challenges in processed food trade. These things were discussed in previous sessions, and then I will relate these opportunities and challenges to the BIMSTEC region, and I show you a small analysis that I did using GTAP, which is a general equilibrium model, and I'll share with you what I think as BIMSTEC could do in order to promote processed food exports. Okay, so what kind of opportunities are there in the processed food sector? On the demand side, we know that there is an increasing demand from the countries themselves. BIMSTEC countries demand processed food the way that other countries do, and this is mainly due to changes in food habits due to urbanization and high nutritional awareness. And at the same time, we can see that not only BIMSTEC countries, but there's a huge demand from non-BIMSTEC countries for processed food. So this is very important. Like when you look at the big picture, actually more demand is there in non-BIMSTEC countries. So in formulating strategies, you should not forget this fact. And from the supply side also, we can see certain innovations. We can see that there are innovative institutions like various contractual arrangements, supermarket revolution, and also innovative policies and technologies. So this actually increased the supply of processed food, and we all talk about global value chains, another big opportunity that was created in the recent past. However, there are certain challenges for expansion of processed food. for an example, we all know that there are increasing import restrictions, particularly non-tariff measures, as well as import tariffs. Devesh was saying that, okay, for primary products, the tariffs are generally lower, but for processed products, there exist higher tariffs, not only from BIMSTEC countries, but also by the non-BIMSTEC countries. And there are restrictions on the supply side as well. Like in many countries, agriculture sector is shrinking, so you cannot actually think of unlimited supply of agricultural raw materials from the countries themselves. And also there are restrictions to import certain intermediate inputs like packaging materials. So there are inherent challenges in the system, and trade facilitation is another barrier. And even though we say that global value chains are opportunities, it is not that easy to get connected to a global value chain. So people actually have examined these challenges and opportunities in greater detail, and they actually came up with certain solid recommendations or findings. One thing is that when we do research in processed food, we have to have a particular definition for processed food. Otherwise, you will be all over the place. That is one thing. The other thing is that it is very clear that for processed food, there is a positive and high income elasticity, meaning that as countries grow, there will be more and more demand for processed food. You do not see that for primary food items, so primary agricultural commodities. That is why we say that as countries expand, the demand for primary products shrink. It is not happening with processed food. And we can also see that with liberalization, processed food trade has increased. So these are some of the key findings of the previous studies, and also rising food safety barriers. However, in the previous literature, we could not find very specific studies on BIMSTEC with respect to processed food. So my study asked several research questions, like what kind of backward and forward linkages we see in BIMSTEC countries, and how important are processed food for BIMSTEC countries, and what is the current pattern of trade, and what are the existing tariff barriers, and should BIMSTEC attempt to negotiate tariff cuts from BIMSTEC as well as non-BIMSTEC countries, and what kind of liberalization options that the BIMSTEC countries are having. So I find some answers for these questions, and let me share with you what I did. Okay, first of all, I was looking for a classification of processed food. So what I understood was that the ideal classification is there in the International Standard Industrial Classification. Actually, it very clearly say that, okay, C10 is manufacture of food from the industry, and C11 is manufacture of beverages. However, we cannot find trade data in ISIC. And for trade classifications, BIC identifies processed food, and in the harmonized system, we can call 11 to 24 as processed food and beverage. And in the SITC, of course, you will have to collect certain sectors as processed food sectors. And following Atukorala and Sen, we did some work using SICT classification. But recently I came across this classification by UNCTAD database, and that is what Devesh presented. And also in GTAP, we can clearly identify certain sectors as processed food. and this was done by previous authors as well. So what I'm going to show you is an analysis done using a GTAP model. Of course, I have a slide on UNCTAD classification, but I'm going to skip that because Devesh covered this part. Here, so what I did was I used the Global Trade Analysis Project, abbreviated as GTAP. This is a general equilibrium model with 65 sectors and 141 regions, but I took only 8 sectors. I lumped the 65 sectors into 8 aggregated sectors and treated one sector as processed food, meaning that I pooled all the processed food and called it processed food sector. And then I divided all 141 regions in the GTAP model into 10 regions, okay? And I took Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Thailand as regions in the model. Of course, I could not present the work in relation to Myanmar and Bhutan because they are not listed as separate regions in this database. So let me share with you what I found. So what I found was that India and Thailand are the major processed food exporters in the region. And when we look at the size of processed food in their trade basket, a larger share is enjoyed by Thailand compared to India, even though India is the largest exporter of processed food. And for Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, the numbers are tiny with respect to the size of trade. And when you look at backward and forward linkages in processed food industries, you can see that there are differences across countries, meaning that when processed food sector expands, the backward sectors will expand in different proportions in different countries. And also we can see that the pattern of exports of processed food is also very different in different countries. So the way that they make trade relations will also be different due to this pattern. And when we look at the size of processed food trade in the world, you can see that BIMSTEC is a smaller region. But when you look at the tariffs charged by BIMSTEC on different countries, you can see that the numbers are quite large, meaning that there is a room to gain by tariff liberalization. So what I did was I used 3 policy shocks. In the first policy shock, what I did was I thought that, okay, BIMSTEC can decide to approach all the non-BIMSTEC countries and get tariffs on processed food reduced. Okay, so that is one of the strategies. The other one is that BIMSTEC can make sure that the entire processed food trade is liberalized. The third one is BIMSTEC can fully liberalize all the imports without limiting to processed food. Okay, so these are the 3 things I did to demonstrate the channels of transmission. I did another shock that is to remove tariffs on Thai processed food charged by India, meaning that India liberalizes processed food trade and that is applicable only for Thai products, okay? So this is what I saw from the shock that was applied to Thai processed food by India. If India does that, of course, India will gain, okay? So this first bar shows that there is a gain to India and there will be gains to Thailand as well, Okay, so both countries will gain when that happens. And there are changes, tiny little changes to Nepal as well. Why? Nepal is a big trading partner of India. When something happens to India, Nepal get affected. Okay, so here I'm showing you what happens to prices, quantities of production and exports. So you can see that when India lowers tariffs on Thai processed food, several things happen. Okay, so you can see that exports of Thailand will increase, and exports of India also will increase by a small way, but exports of Nepal will go down. So these are due to the relationships that these countries are having, and you cannot just assume that when the two countries engage in trade, only the two countries are affected. They are neighboring countries, the trading partners will have residual effects. And you can see that employment in Thailand will increase, but at the same time you can see that employment in India and Nepal will go down. So this is employment of resources in the processed food sectors. Okay, so here you can see the spillover effects. So let me very quickly show you what happens with the, what happens with the alternative tariff liberalization options. I will quickly go, and here what I'm showing is what happens to quantities and what happens to efficiency. So what you can see is that if you focus only on processed food, and if BIMSTEC gets all the countries in the world to liberalize processed food tariffs charged on BIMSTEC countries, you can get some tiny little gains. But if you can liberalize entire processed food trade in the world, the gains will be huge. And if BIMSTEC countries liberalize all its trade, then the welfare gains will be huge. So what I'm trying to say here is that don't conceal by the changes in production quantities and export quantities, look at the welfare gains. So you can gain a lot if you unilaterally liberalize all your trade. So if you focus too much on one sector, or if you focus too much on few countries, the gains will not be that high. So it's actually obvious, but this quantitative analysis shows the magnitudes of gains and how big are the gains and how small are they. Okay, so all in all, what I can say is that, of course, if one country liberalizes tariffs on processed food, the respective exporting country will gain, no two words, and if you liberalize processed food trade, Thailand will gain a lot because Thailand has the comparative advantage, but India will also gain because of the mere size. India's gains will be much larger. But it is possible that small countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh can worse off due to some of these liberalization attempts. So if you really want to gain, then of course you have to go for broad-brushed efforts rather than going by piecemeal approaches. So in selecting a good way to liberalize trade, you will have to look at the big picture and do some serious research using this kind of global models. Then only you can see the fine effects on different countries and different sectors. So with that, I conclude. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and it was nice to see GTAP being used. Of course, in RIS also, Professor Mohanty is among others who uses. Here, I would like to add one more point when we talk in terms of tariffs. I'll give just a small example. Suppose there is a commodity and exports when unprocessed worth $100 face a tariff of 5%. So the tariff phase is $5 on $100. When we do a slight value addition, export increases from $100 to $150. And if tariff increases to 10%, so the tariff becomes $15. So in reality, on the incremental from 100 to 150, that is on $50, there is an additional tariff of $10. So effective rate, incremental rate becomes 20%, not 15%. So it hits harder, it dissuades to go in for processing or for value addition for generation of more livelihood. So these issues are also equally important. I come to the last speaker of this panel, Dr. Devendra Gochan, and he's from Institute of Agriculture and Animal Sciences, Tribhuvan University, plus Senior Research Fellow at Integrated Development Studies Institute. He is also working for a CGIAR institute and has more than 100 papers to his credit. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you,
Say
Chair.
about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, good afternoon. I'll be presenting. Okay, so can you show? It's not coming. Here it's coming. Can we help? Yeah, it's coming. No. Yes. Okay. Okay. So I'll be briefly presenting about Nepal's trade of processed and non-processed foods within BIMSTEC regions. So Nepal's international trade is relatively very small. As a small country, with current prices, it is around only US dollar 13.5 billion. Yeah. So it's not very high. It's a small trade, but it is huge. Trade deficit. Of course, almost 80%, 11.2 billion trade deficit, and the export sector accounts 7% around of the GDP, and overall trade accounts for 38% of GDP of Nepal. So in the last one decade, the trade growth rate of compound annual growth rate of trade was 10% per annum, while with only export growth was lesser, 7%, while import growth was higher. Import growth of 11%. So import growth is in a higher rate and growing higher than export. Therefore, Nepal has the import-export ratio is almost 10%. That is, we are importing 10 times more than what we export. So this is a huge trade deficit. This is general. Okay, so in the last 10 years, if you see the negative trade balance, you can see from here. So import is increasing in rapid rate as compared to marginal growth rate of exports. So Nepal has, trading with many countries, more than 100 countries, if you see the list. But, only, 11 countries have some share of, I'm showing here. So India is the largest, trading partners. Almost 64% of the trade, Nepal's trade is with India. And then China, around 14%, and then Indonesia. So within BIMSTEC country, only after India, only Thailand is okay. It has around 1% of trade, overall trade. So these are the 11 topmost countries that Nepal has trade. So within BIMSTEC country, if you see with India, because if you so trade with India is so big, so if we cannot compare together with other BIMSTEC countries, I separated. So import is, almost 800 billion US dollars, and export is only around 1 point something billion. So we have a huge negative trade balance, almost 1:8. We are importing 8 times from India than export. So while with Thailand also we have negative trade balance, Bangladesh negative, though the trade with them is very small, less than 1%, even with Bangladesh and Bhutan. Bhutan is very small, Myanmar and Sri Lanka, very, very tiny scale. So all we have a negative trade balance. And so I'm showing what is the share of the whole trade for food products, import and in terms of imports for the last, if you see the last almost 15 years, the trend shows that import share is increasing. The last year in 2021 to 22 declined a little bit because of global Ukraine crisis and so Nepal's own protectionist policy, while import share is almost not increasing in the total value of trade. So export share is increasing anyway. And within overall trade, so overall within the BIMSTEC countries, so food products, so I'm talking about only food products. Earlier was general. Food products account for 1/3 of the total trade of Nepal. So because Nepal is mainly agro-based country, so food products shares of trade is higher, 1/3 overall. Import share is, I mentioned lesser, around 17%. Export share is higher, around almost half of the total trade. So India almost shares in almost largest share. I don't need to mention here. For Bangladesh and Bhutan, Bhutan is very tiny. For food products, when I look from the data of FAO statistics data, so India you can see very large export. So India has a larger export than import. So it's a positive. India has a positive trade balance. Thailand has a very positive. So other countries, Bangladesh negative, Nepal negative, and other almost Sri Lanka is almost same. Not much positive also. So in terms of percent share of food exports and imports in total trade, so when I look from the data of the World Development Indicators and see that in terms of export-import, so Myanmar and Nepal has a higher share of exports than imports. Okay, also relatively India also, but their share is small because India and Thailand, they have a bigger total other non-agro products, non-food products. They have a trade, so the share of agro-food products is smaller, while Nepal and Myanmar have high share of food products in terms of total trade. So, for Nepal, I just look at the overall, topmost food items, exported and imported. Yeah. So overall trade of food items, excluding some of the non-food agriculture products like jute or there are non-food also agro products, but this is our mainly food products. So there is between last 3 years. These are the 3 years data from the Department of Customs, Ministry of Finance. There is a slight increase in the recent 2020-23 for palm oil. Soybean oil has declined because I think Russia-Ukraine crisis, because mainly imported from there. And large cardamom is increasing. Fruit juice, Nepal major food items. Fruit juice is Nepal's major export items. Large cardamom, tea, noodles, pasta and noodles, ginger, vegetable and fruits. And there is also a small item but increasing prepared food. The other spices include, other than large cardamom. Of course, Nepal is the largest producer and exporter of large cardamom, though its volume is small. But also Nepal is ginger, also one of the 4th largest producer, but export is very fluctuating. So other spices includes mostly, other than ginger and cardamom. There are other spices like, Himalayan spices. We have sorry. Okay. So these are the exports. And major imported top 5 food items from Nepal was fats and oils, mainly the oil, crude oil, like for palm, soybean, cereals, vegetables, prepared foods, coffee, tea, and these are mostly, fat and oils are important beyond the BIMSTEC countries. These are from Indonesia and Malaysia, but mostly orders are from India. Yeah. So export, if you think of this total share of processed food in the total food items, because food constitutes both processed and non-processed. So I try to analyze what is the share of processed food in total. Then share of processed food of export items from Nepal is higher. So 62% in 2022-23, and then 88% in 21-22 because of the large in export of palm oil and processed palm oil and soybean oil, and 81% in 2021. So now palm oil and this soybean oil is declining recently, the export. In terms of import, of share of what is the share of processed food in the total food imports, so it shows the import share is around 43, 44, around 40%. So as compared to export, import share of processed food item in import is lesser, because import is larger volume Nepal imports. So in that case, that happened. So if you see the processed food products, so processed industries in food industries are the biggest industries in large number of industries, and the largest share of the value, in terms of you can see the 72% of the industries, the value of total value of the industries are from processed food industries. So in Nepal, most of the industries are processed food industries. And the price, price of both processed and non-processed, you can see there is a lot of fluctuations for price of processed and non-processed. Potato, non-processed, you can see soybean oil is a processed. Okay, so there are important food processing sector I don't need to mention. These are